Hey guys, welcome back. Joe Brunsman, Insurance Broker of the Stars here. Tonight I'm talking about why paying for ransomware just got even harder. So if it wasn't hard enough, it's only getting worse. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, you might be sitting there going, hey, you know what? I've looked at my Tech E&O policy, I've looked at my cyber policy, or some other type of policy you may have, and you're saying, I have something like this, cyber extortion cost coverage or digital ransom expense coverage, something to that effect. What's the deal here, right? What is the catch? Well, like everything in life, there's always a catch, and it's never as easy as it seems, unfortunately. So if we just take a quick rewind here, this is going to be important for our discussion. This is dealing with OFAC. Now, you'll notice this is just kind of a stock-looking letter that you're going to find in all types of different insurance policies. This one just happens to be from Hiscox, but they're going to be in all the different type of policies as well from all types of different insurance providers. And what this is saying is it's getting into the U.S. Department of Treasury Office of Foreign Assets Control, also known as OFAC. Now, at the very bottom, that paragraph is saying, hey, we as an insurance company are not going to do business with specially designated nationals, also known as an SDN within OFAC, blocked persons, or sanctioned countries, right? So they're specifically saying there, we may not engage in business or do transactions with these entities. Now, what does that have to do with anything cyber insurance related, or more specifically, ransomware related? Well, let's take a rewind all the way back to October of 2020 when there was this kind of bomb that got dropped on the cyber insurance community that a lot of executives and IT personnel just weren't aware of at the time, and frankly still are not aware of. That's really important for you. So see that at the top, advisory on potential sanctions risks for facilitating ransomware payments. And this effectively just says, hey, we don't want you doing any type of ransomware payment, right, is effectively what they're saying here. But they're also saying it may actually violate OFAC regulations. Now, with that, kind of moving further into the letter, it says U.S. persons, so that could be your business, that could be your insurance company, are generally prohibited from engaging in transactions directly or indirectly with anybody on the OFAC sanctions list, effectively, right? And that list is constantly changing. You're going to see why that's important here in a second. Next, they're saying, hey, OFAC can impose civil penalties for sanctions violations. And oh, by the way, they view this under the guise of strict liability. So even if you didn't know that you were violating this particular law or series of laws, you can still be held liable for that in a court of law. So just because you didn't know, or you were under the impression that you weren't violating these particular statutes, you can still get burned for that in court. And I might just say, if you want some nightmare fuel, just go look at the recent OFAC penalties and sanctions. In some of these cases, we're talking hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of dollars that get pushed out there. Now, bringing this kind of into the common day here, per the Wall Street Journal, and this just came out but a few days ago. This is from Ed McNicholas of Ropes and Gray. He said the overlap of the rise in ransomware and then these pervasive sanctions against Russia has created quite a firestorm in terms of the ability to pay ransom, right? So now we're just talking about the sheer ability to pay the ransoms. Moving on here, this is from the CEO of Coveware, which helps facilitate a lot of this. He goes, with the war, it's becoming incredibly dynamic where the entire landscape can shift or change when you wake up in the morning. There's more sanctions happening every single day. So what does this mean kind of in real people terms? It means that when an organization gets hit with ransomware, ideally they're going to have some type of insurance to cover that. But part of that insurance and part of the feature that could be available to you is the forensics, right? And they're going to determine, hey, what type of ransomware do we think this is? Where do we reasonably think that came from? Now they're going to have to compare that to these ongoing, never-ending sanctions. And they're going to have to make sure that it can't even directly or indirectly, if you remember the letter, go back to someone who's either on that sanctions list or to a country that's on the sanctions list or to a particular entity that's on the sanctions list. Okay, so with that, further within the letter, it does say, hey, there is a possibility for a waiver here with a presumption of denial. So what does that mean for all of us people operating in the real world? Unless you have a lobbying group on Capitol Hill or your CEO is golfing buddies with some senator on some important committee somewhere, you're probably not going to get that waiver. All right. So if you're not Home Depot or Target or Nike or somebody to that effect, good luck. I hope you have really good backups in that case, unfortunately. Now, continuing on here, let's talk about an actual story where this had true impact here. And this is from an attorney who was relaying this case in this Wall Street Journal article that I'll link to below. She said, hey, all the way back in June of 2020, some IT services firm, they made a payment to release their systems following a ransomware attack. Now, some third party, right, so some other entity, not even involved in the investigation, right? So we're not talking about the forensics guys here or the attorney who's bringing up these questions. It's some unaffiliated third party, not involved in the investigation, wrote an article merely suggesting that that attack against this IT services firm could have been attributed to somebody on the sanctions list. So what do you think happened from there? Well, the insurance company, hey, they just stopped payment for that $1 million. Now, incidentally, this IT services firm, now they're on the hook for $1 million. So what did they have to go out and do? They had to raise additional funding from their investors who I am sure were not particularly happy about this situation. Now, the insurance company, why can they do that? Well, they can't violate the OFAC sanctions list, and they're not going to get sanctioned by the United States government and get put on the naughty list to help out but one of probably tens of thousands of insureds that they have on their book, right? They're just not going to do that no matter how much you plead with them. But in their defense, the insurance company actually reached out to OFAC. And then almost 2 years later, they still have not heard a reply. So I'm sure this IT services firm is just sitting there in the wings going, for the love of God, would you reimburse us this $1 million? And the insurance company is sitting there going, we can't. We're in this weird limbo. So this is a place you don't want your business to be. Now, even moreover, we've been talking about the U.S. Department of Treasury. We've been talking about OFAC. This article just came out a couple weeks ago, and this is talking about FinCEN, and it's U.S. warns banks, crypto firms against potential efforts to evade Russian sanctions. So as the war in Ukraine continues, and I'm sure once the invasion is over with, however this pans out, there's going to be, these sanctions will likely remain in place, plus additional sanctions put on. So this is a problem that's not going to go away. It's only going to get more difficult. But even FinCEN is saying like, hey, you guys have to flag this. If you don't, we can come after you. So there's yet another government entity potentially in the fray here. So moving forward with all of this, what do I think everybody should really take away from this? Now, coming from the insurance guy, I'm going to say defense in depth, defense in depth, defense in depth. All right. Cyber insurance is not the entirety of the answer. Ideally, insurance is one of those few products in the world where both the buyer and the seller hope it never gets used. And in this case, you can see that when it's becoming even more difficult to pay for these ransomware payments, that's just not a place you want to be in. And if you've never, ideally you've never been in the situation where you've had to go through this, some companies just kind of have this weird idea that, okay, we got hit with ransomware, everybody takes a 1 week unplanned vacation, we come back in the office, everything's fine, the insurance company deals with this. That is not true whatsoever. It is just a soul-crushing, time-sucking, awful experience for everybody. Of course, you're going to have clients dealing with lack of services, and it's just on and on and on, and it just snowballs very quickly. So you don't even want to be in a position where this could even be a question for you. Now, learning under duress is going to be a bad idea, which is why I put out these videos. This is not something that you or your buddies in other industries that are running these organizations want to find out about after they've already been hit with ransomware. Okay, so with that, hey, share this. Make sure you're digging into this more on your own. Talk to appropriate legal counsel to get more of the details that are associated with this particular event, because it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get more complex. So you might as well just throw your hat in the ring now. Now, with that, we're going to be looking at lengthier resolutions and increase in downtime following ransomware events, right? Because it's just going to take longer, as you read before, for the forensics guys and the people that are assisting with the facilitation of these ransomware payments to make sure that they're not going to be put on the naughty list and you're not going to be put on the naughty list, courtesy of the United States government. So what does that really boil down to? Well, that's going to be more insurance. So now we're talking about greater business interruption reimbursement. All right. It's also going to be greater bills paid to all of these various entities involved in a ransomware response, because they all have to, check additional boxes and do yet even more due diligence moving forward. It's also going to mean greater risk of reputational harm. The longer you're down, the longer you can't provide services, the higher the likelihood you start breaching various contracts, or your clients get pissed off and they're like just throwing their hands up and they're going, hey, you know what, if you can't fix this, I'm just going to take my business somewhere else. All right, so make sure you account for that in your insurance policy. Also, company down 2 weeks with ransomware, hey, that kind of just happens all the time, unfortunately. Now, let's say company down for a month because of ransomware. Well, that could potentially get some media interest going on there. Or if you just happen to be the guy that pays a ransom and it turns out it was on the OFAC sanctions list, you best believe your business is going to be in national news if that happens. And someone like me is probably going to be talking about it to try and warn others away from that potentiality. So please make sure that you understand that as well. That's going to impact how much cyber insurance you could carry. And then, of course, job insecurity. So if you're watching this, as I said at the beginning, learning under duress is a bad idea. You want to learn before the bad thing happens, not while the bad thing is occurring. So for people out there that are C-suite executives, chief executives, CISOs, CIOs, MSPs, etc., this is a great way to, unfortunately, lose your job if something like this were to occur. All right, so please be proactive. This should have an immediate impact on how your organization views cybersecurity expenditures and cybersecurity defense. So if you've been kind of sitting on the fence there for a while, and maybe your MSP has been saying, hey, here's some additional controls we can put in place to try and mitigate this threat, and you just haven't gotten around to it, this should really be the kick in the pants for you to say, okay, you know what? It's getting more complex. The risk is getting greater. There's a whole bunch more uncertainty here, and it looks like it's only going to get worse. So we might as well just take the dragon by the tail and just go for a ride. Do the things you need to do. All right. And I'll just say it again. Cyber insurance is part of, but not all of, the cyber puzzle. Okay. So you can no longer rely, for a whole series of issues, which is really the topic of another video, you can't just solely rely on cyber insurance anymore. The market's not going to handle it. You're going to have just a hell of a time trying to get a policy, if you even get quotes to begin with. Okay, so just like you wouldn't buy a great health insurance policy and then eat yourself into a diabetic coma, you don't want to buy a cyber insurance policy and then just completely negate all of this, because as you saw in this video, hey, maybe you're really relying on that cyber policy to pay the extortion payment so that you can get your stuff back. Well, one, it's not that easy anyways, even if you're allowed to do it. Two, you're not even guaranteed to get your files back, so that should be part of the equation. But three, hey, you don't want to be the lucky guy that has to jump on this grenade. All right, so make sure that you're taking this threat appropriately. All right, with that, hey, if you found this useful and you learned something today, please like the video, share this with your buddies to make sure that they're staying out of trouble. Comment if you have any additional questions, and please subscribe to the channel. Right above me here should be another video which you should find interesting, and if you click over there on my beautiful face, you can subscribe to my channel. All right, with that, guys, stay safe.